Well, good evening to you all. Good evening, welcome. If you're still in the queue, feel free to stay, get something to eat and drink, and then come on down and join us at one of the tables. Welcome to the Christmas edition of Big Conversations here at Carrubbers Christian Centre. I've always wanted to say that. This is the Christmas edition, so I get to do it this year. That's my Christmas present. Tonight we are asking the question, is Christmas more than a fairy tale? Here's what you can expect and how the evening's going to run. I'm going to be walking us through the evening. I'll be giving you some things to think about, but at various points in the evening, I'm going to stop talking and sit down and hand over to you at your tables, and you're going to keep the conversation going. I'll put something up on the screen for you to respond to react to, and to chat about among yourselves. Also, you'll hear a short interview with someone, and we'll also hear some musical pieces performed to us by our house band. So that's the plan for this evening. Now, as the nights grow darker, as the mercury drops in the thermometers, it's a good excuse to curl up on a sofa, turn on the television, and watch something. And so why don't you turn to the people at your tables, why don't you introduce yourself, tell them who you are, where you're coming from, and why don't you share what is your favorite Christmas movie? Over to you. Is that your dad? This is Chris. Chris is a professional musician. With a bit of a buzz in the room, why don't you just shout out some Christmas movies? Shout out. Christmas Carol, classic. Home Alone, very good. A Wonderful Life. Well, we'll come to that, Chris, in a minute. We know, Chris. Elf, that's a good one. That's a very good one. That's a very good one. Well, I'll tell you about my favorite Christmas movie, which isn't any of these ones, but I'll tell you about mine in a few minutes. But I wonder, have you ever considered what is it that we love so much about Christmas movies? Why is it that they're so popular? I wonder, is it because they often tell a story that resonates with the deepest desires and longings of our hearts? Let me give you a few examples. If you type into Google best Christmas movies, you will see a big long list of different ones, all rated in order from most popular to least popular. Here are three of the most popular of all time. There is the one that was mentioned over here, It's a Wonderful Life. A story, just one at a time, thank you. It's a Wonderful Life. So a story about how hope outlasts despair. There's the next one. Love Actually, how love overcomes obstacles. And then there is this great Christmas classic, Die Hard. Story about how good defeats evil. That's Chris's favorite, obviously. Now, these films, they're fiction. But they tell stories about things that we all hope are real. All hope are possible. They could come true. And the good news is that all of these things, hope that outlasts despair, love that overcomes all obstacles, good that overcomes evil, all of these things have come true in the life of Jesus Christ, whose birth we celebrate at Christmas. And that's what we're going to be thinking about tonight, how the Christmas nativity story, it's not just another feel-good but made-up story. It's based on true events. It really happened. That's what we're going to discover together. Well, to get us into the festive mood, Stephen and Chris are going to come, our house band tonight, and they're going to perform a song for us to get us into that festive mood. It's entitled The First Noel. Sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Noel, earth and heaven embraced, as a virgin beheld her newborn babe from realms on high to a manger on earth. Salvation had dawned in a lowly birth. Noel, 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 Noel. Born is the King of Israel. The Son of God, in kindness he came, as a friend to the hopeless, the lost and the lame. Our sins he bore, yet his name we despise, and the hands that brought healing were pierced as he died. Noel, 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 Noel. Born is the King of Israel. The author of life, there lifeless he lay, as the grave cast its shadow and darkness reigned. Then out of death broke forth a great light, as he rose up in victory. Glorious Christ, Noel, 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 Noel. Born is the King of Israel. Now let us soar with one accord, bring praises to our King. All glory, power, and honor be forever unto him. Now let us soar with one accord, bring praises to our King. All glory, power, and honor be forever unto Him. Born is the King of Israel. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen and Chris. Well, as we think about that question tonight, is Christmas any more than a fairy tale? Let me be honest with you that I understand many people today in the world in which we live really struggle to take seriously and to believe in the reality of the Christmas nativity story. They think about the scene and it just doesn't seem believable. Think about it just for a moment. You have the Son of God come from heaven to earth, born as a human child, lying in a cattle feeding trough, watched over by his virgin mother and adoptive father, who are visited by shepherds from the fields who have just heard from angels from the realms of glory the news he's been born. And then eventually along come some wise men or kings bringing gifts of gold, frankincense, of myrrh. And all of this is happening under the light of a new star in the heavens. It's a wonderful story. It's a beautiful story. But is it a believable story? Many people in our world today struggle to say yes to that. They wonder, how can we who live in the advanced modern age believe in an ancient story about God, angels, and a miracle baby born to a virgin? Well, what do you think? I'm going to pause for a minute. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to put this question on the screen. I want you to chat at your tables and share with one another what you think. On a scale of 1 to 5, how easy do you find it to believe the original story of Christmas? 1, it's impossible. 2, it's unlikely. 3, it's irrelevant. 4, it's possible. 5, it's true. What do you think and why? Take 5 minutes. Well, you'll be relieved to hear I'm not going to put you on the spot. I'm not going to ask you to put your hands up and tell me where you are on the scale. Instead, I'm going to put someone else on the spot this evening. I'm going to invite my friend Joy. Joy, come and join me. And I'm going to put Joy on the spot and ask Joy that question. So, Joy, you've not always been a Christian. You became a Christian 7 or 8 years ago. Take us back before that time. Before you were a Christian, where would you have been on the scale?
The school's not up. Yeah, I definitely would have been on 3. It's kind of irrelevant. I'm too busy just living my own life. I'm too busy enjoying Christmas to actually think about what it's about. And I was I brought up in a Christian home, and I understood the story of who Jesus was and why he came and how it fitted into the larger biblical narrative. But it was nothing personal to me. I hadn't made a personal commitment of faith, and probably a bit of a stubborn heart as well. And so Christmas was all about the faff and the tinsel and parties and presents and hanging with family. Yeah.
So it was all irrelevant. What was it that began to change that for you? Tell us a little about your journey from 3 to 5.
Yeah, so I lived quite a hedonistic lifestyle, I would say. I seen money as fun tokens. So I worked to earn fun tokens so I could go traveling to cool places or, partying with friends and stuff like that. But I started becoming a bit discontent with that maybe 7, 8 years ago. There was just a bit of an emptiness about it or something, and I started asking the big questions of life. Why am I here? What am I doing? Fun tokens just don't have the answer. And so I started reading quite a lot, and particularly the Gospel of John. And I was very intrigued by Jesus, actually, and just the miracles that he was doing. Casting out demons. Raising people from the dead and teaching about eternal life and being born of the Spirit. And and people were following him. And it's kind of stuff I knew from when I was growing up as a child or whatever, but I kind of wasn't listening back then. And now I was starting to listen to what Jesus was saying and what he was doing and why, but also it was how he was teaching as well. He was like speaking to people on the margins and especially in the culture back then when, he wouldn't, and I think particularly, like just a quick example is in John 4, he meets the Samaritan woman by the well. And she asks him a question. She asks him, "Are you greater than our father Jacob?" And Jesus doesn't say, yes, I'm greater, much greater than him. Jesus starts talking about living water and that you'll never thirst or, eternal life and things like that. So, I was just intrigued, interested. So I probably then went to number 4, is possible, but I'd need more evidence. And there's, probably a lot of extra biblical sort of evidence. Even the museum in the British Museum down in London, where there's all these artifacts and archaeology that you can go and see and almost physically touch these actual artifacts that tie in with the biblical story. The history of the Bible ties in with the world history and all that kind of stuff. So it was kind of probably like joining the dots of, okay, that makes sense. And just the biblical worldview as well. It's, I was saying at the table there, you don't have to teach a 2-year-old to disobey. They just do it. The worldview of the Bible, it was bit of a progression, I guess, from 3 to 4 to 5, and time and a lot of different things. But I'm now on 5. I believe it really happened.
That's great, Joy. Thanks so much for sharing with us your story. Let's give a hand for Joy. Joy hates standing at the front speaking, so that was extra brave. So thank you, Joy. Well, the journey that Joy's described there, certainly tonight, my hope and my prayer for all of us tonight is that either you'll go away with something just to think about more this Christmas, or maybe on the back of what we talk about and discover tonight, maybe you would be prepared to take another step on the journey of faith. Well, if you remember a few minutes ago, I got you to share at your tables your favorite Christmas movies, and I teased that I would share with you mine. So let me tell you about my favorite Christmas movie. Anyone know this one? Let's have it on screen. This one? A Miracle on 34th Street. I think I love this film partly because this was the very first time I ever went to the cinema with my P1 class to see this back in the early 1990s when it appeared. You can work out my age from there. This film tells a story about a girl who doesn't believe in Santa Claus. Her mother's raised her that way. But all that begins to change when she meets this wonderful old kind man in the street called Kris Kringle. He starts her to question, maybe Santa does exist, and maybe he's incarnate in the person of Kris Kringle. Now, to cut a very long story short, about 2 hours of screen time, Kris Kringle has to fight to keep his freedom. He is arrested, he's put on trial, and he faces being locked away for the rest of his life in a mental hospital. And so Kris Kringle has to prove that he is Santa Claus. And the government don't make it easy for him. The state make it very difficult for him. They bring in these expert witnesses, people who have been to the North Pole, who have been there, and they testify they've never seen any workshops. Kris Kringle replies, well, they're invisible. They ask him questions like, how is it possible that one man can create a toy every year for every child in the world? Well, the answer is it's the elves that do it, says Kris Kringle. They even bring a reindeer into the courtroom in New York, and they say, make the reindeer fly. And Kris Kringle says, well, of course I can't make it fly. It's impossible. He only flies on Christmas Eve. And so it seems hopeless. How is it that this wonderful man is going to prove that he should remain free? Well, at the last possible moment, as the judge is about to hand down his decision, the little girl appears in court. She walks up to the bench, and she presents the judge with a Christmas card. He opens it, and inside there is a $1 bill. And on that dollar bill, this girl has circled a few words. The words, "In God we trust." Inspired by this, the judge announces that if the government can believe on the basis of faith without proof that God exists, then also that court can believe on the basis of faith that Santa Claus exists and is Kris Kringle. And so everyone celebrates and everyone lives happily ever after, as these films have to end. Let me say that I love that film, but also that film annoys me. It leaves me feeling deeply uncomfortable by how it equates belief in Santa Claus and belief in God. And particularly the assumption it makes that there is no proof for either of them. It asserts that essentially, if you believe in God, if you're a religious person, you believe in God on the basis of blind faith without any evidence, any reasons to do so. It's essentially just wishful thinking. Now, many in our society think that way, that religious belief is just wishful thinking. It's all about pie in the sky when you die. Our culture thinks that way thanks to an Austrian atheist, a psychologist named Sigmund Freud over a century ago. Sigmund Freud explained away all of religion as being a psychological phenomenon, wish fulfillment. He suggested that because we live in a world that is dangerous, which is difficult, which is filled with all kinds of uncertainties and challenges, what we're all looking for is a father figure who will take our hand and look after us and guard us and guide us. And so we take that desire, that psychological need that we have for a father figure, we project it onto the clouds, and that's what we call God, our big father up in the sky, cosmic daddy up in the sky, looking after us. Freud writes in his book, The Future of an Illusion, that's religion, he says, we shall tell ourselves it would be very nice if there was a God who created the world and was a benevolent providence, that is, that he's good and he looks after us along every step of life's journey, and an afterlife. But it is a very striking fact that all this is exactly as we are bound to wish it to be. And so he says, religion, belief in God, it's just wishful thinking. Now, a lot of things could be said in response to Sigmund Freud, not least the fact that believing in the God of the Bible forces me to believe things that go against my wishes and my desires. But we'll leave that aside for now. Instead, what I want to say back to Sigmund Freud this evening is that it's not just people who believe in God who might be in danger of wishful thinking. It is also possible that people who do not believe in God do so out of wishful thinking. That it would be actually more convenient for them to not have a God in heaven who made them, who gave them life, who has a will and a plan for their lives, and who one day is going to hold them account for what they've done in their lives. It is actually wishful thinking to wish that that's not the case for some people. Uncommonly honest is an atheist philosopher called Thomas Nagel. He confesses, I speak from experience, being strongly subject to the fear of religion myself. I want atheism to be true, and I am made uneasy by the fact that some of the most intelligent and well-informed people, like Joy, are religious believers. It isn't just that I don't believe in God and naturally hope that I'm right in my belief. It's that I hope there is no God. I don't want there to be a God. I don't want the universe to be like that. Thomas Nagel is uncommonly honest about his wishful thinking, his atheism. I make that point just to simply show that this idea of wishful thinking, it doesn't take us very far at all. It cuts both ways, against both believers and unbelievers. It certainly doesn't help us answer the question, did the nativity story really happen? Or is it just a fairy tale? It's not going to help us. Well, let me pause again. I would like to put a question to you at your tables to chat about for the next few minutes. How do you feel about the existence of God? Do you like the idea that God exists, or honestly, do you dislike that possibility? And why? Over to you for a few minutes. Well, thank you for your honesty so far. As we come back to our question, is Christmas more than a fairy tale? The thing that makes Christianity different from all of the other religions in this world or all the other belief systems in this world is that it doesn't begin with me. It doesn't begin with my thoughts and my ideas, my feelings, my desires, my wishes. No, it starts out there and it confronts me. It begins with things, it's based on things that really happened in human history. When the God who made this world, the God who gave us life, stepped down into this world in observable human history and introduced himself to us in the person of Jesus Christ. And for the next few minutes, I'd love to share with you one of the historical accounts of the life of Jesus. Joy mentioned John's Gospel. John was one of the early followers of Jesus who wrote down his experiences with Jesus. Someone else who also recorded the facts and the things that happened with Jesus was a man called Luke. Luke himself did not know Jesus, but Luke went around as a good investigative reporter and like a historian, and he interviewed and met with the people who had followed Jesus, who had encountered Jesus. He carefully investigated and researched all the things that they experienced. And he gathered up all this evidence, and he wrote it down for us in his book, The Gospel According to Luke. And still to this day, it is a highly respected historical source. And it's Luke who records the nativity story that we're so used to hearing. It begins with these words. In those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered. This was the first registration when Quirinius was governor of Syria. And all went to be registered, each to his own town. And Joseph also went up from Galilee, from the town of Nazareth, to Judea, to the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David, to be registered with Mary, his betrothed, who was with child. And while they were there, the time came for her to give birth. And she gave birth to her firstborn son, and wrapped him in swaddling clothes, and laid him in a manger, because there was no place for them in the inn. I'm sure you've heard that read somewhere, if not had to act that out at school or somewhere else at some time in your life. But notice these are the words of a historian, someone who has carefully researched and gathered the evidence. He has spoken to the people who saw this happen. And he is very careful to record for us a series of facts about the first Christmas nativity. First set of facts you'll see in verses 1 and 2 when Luke records the when of Jesus' birth. And notice that this doesn't begin like a fictional story, once upon a time. No, it begins during the global reign of Caesar Augustus and the local reign of Governor Quirinius. According to modern dating, this is roughly about the year 4 BC. You actually can pinpoint on a calendar the Christmas nativity when it happened. It's the first piece of evidence. Second thing is in what he records in verses 3 through 5, where Luke records the where of Jesus' birth. And again, notice that this is not a story that's set a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, or in a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit, or however else you want to start one of your favorite stories. No, instead, this story took place in the little town of Bethlehem, a satellite village a few miles outside the capital city of Jerusalem. It happened in the land of Israel. And so the first Christmas nativity, you can take a pin on Google and pin it in the map. It happened in a real place. There's a third set of facts that Luke records for us then in verses 6 and 7. He records the how of Jesus' birth. He tells us that familiar story of the Christmas nativity. Mary and Joseph going to Bethlehem, not being able to find a place for heavily pregnant Mary to be able to rest and comfortably give birth. And so they find a place that's occupied by animals. And that's where Mary gives birth. And then they lay the baby Jesus in the manger. In an earlier passage, just back, turn the page in Luke chapter 1, Luke tells us that the conception of Jesus happened in the most extraordinary way. It's not through Mary and Joseph lying together as a normal husband and wife would do in conceiving a child. This was a miracle baby. This was a child that was conceived in Mary's womb by God's Holy Spirit. When you turn the page after the Christmas Nativity story, you find the story of the shepherds. Shepherds who hear the news that Jesus has been born, but it's announced to them by a troop of angels. This is no ordinary birth of any ordinary child. Instead, all the extraordinary things around about the birth of this child are because this is an extraordinary person. Jesus is none other than the God of heaven stepped down into this world. And so Luke records for us these facts about the when and the where and the how. But that leaves another question to be asked, and it's why? Why did all this happen? Why did God come from heaven to earth? Why was he born in this humble circumstances? Well, the answer is very simple. The answer is love. The Nativity is this pivotal turning point in the unfolding of God's great love story. God made this world. He made us to be his children and to bathe and live our lives under his love. But sadly, the human race has spurned God's love. God's love is unrequited, to use that old phrase. We've told God, no, we don't want you in our lives. We don't want to live your life your way, as Thomas Nagel put it a few minutes ago. In each of our hearts, there is this deep suspicion, this deep hostility against the existence of God, because we would much rather just live for ourselves and live as we see fit. We resent the idea that we owe God our allegiance and our appreciation for the gift of life. Rather than let God be the author of the story of our lives and the author of history of this world, instead we've snatched the divine pen because we want to write our own scripts. We want to be the authors of our own destinies. The Bible calls that sin. Trying to snatch the pen from God and be our own little gods and godlets. Sin. And it's because of sin that we have made a mess not just of ourselves, but we've left a trail of misery across the pages of history. Yet the Bible comes to us and it brings us this good news that God still loves us. And in his love, he's pursuing us. He's coming after us, so much so that he comes from heaven to earth to try and win us back. He has written himself into the story of this world to begin putting right all the stuff that we have messed up through our sin. The way I find it helpful to think about this is to tell you a true story about a famous English author called Dorothy Sayers. Dorothy Sayers is famous for writing a series of novels about a detective. And interestingly, partway through this series of novels, another character appears out of nowhere, a woman called Harriet Vane. And there's a lot of interesting parallels between Dorothy Sayers, the author, and Harriet Vane, the character. Both were the first women to graduate from Oxford University. Both are the writers of detective novels. And what happens is Harriet Vane rescues the detective in the stories. And they wind up falling in love and getting married and going off and solving crimes together, happily ever after. And many people have noticed that there's all these similarities between the author and the character. It's no coincidence. Someone else has put it this way. Dorothy Sayers looked into the world she created and into the character she created and saw his pain, saw his loneliness, fell in love with him, and wrote herself into the story just to save him. And that's what God did at the first Christmas. He looked down on this world that he has made. He has looked down on the people whom he has made and he loves. He's seen the mess we've made of this world. And he wrote himself into the story to come and save us. And so seeing the confusion and the chaos, the misery and the meaninglessness, the inhumanity and the injustice of this world, God has come down. He's become one of us. He suffered like all of us. He's died on the cross for us and for our sins. And history records the incredible fact that he rose again from the dead, proving that death is not the end. It does not have to have the last word on your story or my story. And that's not just wishful thinking. That's true. That really happened. It's why 2,000 years later we still know the name Jesus. It's why 2,000 years later we celebrate Christmas, the festival of Christ, Jesus Christ. Because this is all true. It all happened. And it can change everything. And so again, here's a question to chew over at your tables. How might it make a difference in your life if the story about Jesus was true? What difference would it make if it was true that there is a God who made you, who loves you, who has a plan and purpose for you, and who's made a way to save you? What difference could that make in your life? Just imagine. And what else would you need to know it's true? Over to you for another 5 minutes. That's Mr. Paper Job. Well, before we hear from the house band again and finish up for the night, as we're thinking about this question, is Christmas more than a fairy tale? I'd like to just finish telling you a true story of someone who found out the answer to that question is yes. His name was Clive Staples Lewis. You may know him better as C.S. Lewis, the author of the Chronicles of Narnia stories. One night, C.S. Lewis was out walking with his Christian friend J.R.R. Tolkien, the author of the Lord of the Rings saga. Lewis was one of the leading thinkers of the last century. He was a professor at Oxford University. His area of specialist study was medieval literature, but his deepest passion was for ancient mythology. But throughout his early life, C.S. Lewis experienced this incredible conflict between his head and his heart because he was an atheist. He later reflected in his autobiography, "All that I loved, I believed to be imaginary. Nearly all that I believed to be real, I thought grim and meaningless." But all that changed on a nighttime stroll with J.R.R. Tolkien along Addison's Walk in Oxford. They were discussing their shared love of mythology. And Lewis asserted that the Christian story of Jesus is just like one of the other pagan myths of the dying and rising gods. Lewis dismissed them and said, "They're lies breathed through silver." But Tolkien shot back, "They're not all lies." And he began to challenge C.S. Lewis that actually there are very good reasons to believe that the Christian story is true, that the Christmas nativity and all the things around Easter, that they really happened. And that was the night that turned everything around in C.S. Lewis's life. A week later, he wrote to his friend, and he described how he had become a Christian. He later on wrote that Christianity is the one true myth, the one that really happened. That realization, it changed his life, it changed his destiny forever. And it can also change yours this Christmas. If you're willing to consider that there is more to Christmas than just a nice feel-good story, it could revolutionize your life, both now and forever. I'm going to invite up Stephen and Chris again. They're going to perform for us one last song. This one is entitled Once Upon. Just all, Once Upon. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this.
Once upon a midnight clear, heaven's song broke through the air. Peace and goodwill toward man, born now in Bethlehem. Once upon a bed of straw, slept the sovereign Son of God, Lord of the universe, breathing the dust of earth. died to rescue us, and all of our shame and sin nailed to the tree with him. Wonderful Counselor, mighty God, our Messiah, name above every name, Gloria in the highest. And once upon a brilliant day, Christ the conqueror was raised, and heaven and nature sing praise to the King of Kings. Wonderful Counselor, mighty God, our Messiah, name above every name, Gloria in the highest. Oh, oh.
Thank you to Stephen and to Chris. If you want to hear more from them, Stephen is here at this church. You'll see him over the Christmas season, playing and singing some more. Chris is from Glasgow. He plays and performs at the Conservatoire. It's great to have him with us this evening, serving us. And thank you so much to you for coming, wherever you have come from this evening, to come and join us and join in our conversation tonight. Is Christmas more than a fairy tale? I hope you could say yes, or at least go away tonight with something to think about, and maybe to move towards thinking maybe it is possible, maybe more possible than I thought before. If you'd like to think some more about that, I'd love to encourage you to take away on your way out a free copy of this book, Have You Ever Wondered? You'll see it in the racks at the back as you leave. Just take one. It's absolutely free. Take it away and read and consider these things and more. Also, if you want to, on the screen, the email address, there it is. explore@carrubbers.org. If you email us at explore@carrubbers.org, then one of us can arrange to meet with you, or maybe we can invite you to come along to a course where you can find out more about Jesus Christ and about the Gospels and their truth, their validity, and what it means for you in your life. So there are opportunities for you to find out more. Please take the opportunity to take away something, to contact us for a further chat. Please come back to anything else that's running here during the Christmas period as well. We'd especially warmly invite you back next Sunday night at 7 o'clock to our 9 lessons and carols, traditional carol service. But for now, Merry Christmas. Thank you for joining us, and good night.